Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Laura Jones, and in this session I'm speaking with mountain runner Yngvild Kaspersen. Yngvild had a great 2019. She was part of the Golden Trail series with a top 10 overall finish. She placed second at the Pikes Peak Marathon, as well as taking the win at both the Trail Cap de Creus and K42 Canarias. As well as running, Yngvild's really busy and is a medical student. She runs for Adidas, is 24 years old and comes from Norway. Yngvild, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So before we sort of get into the more detailed questions, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you started out running.
Yeah, so I was a soccer player for a lot of years. Since I was maybe 6 years old, I started playing soccer, and I was playing until I was 19. And I was very focused, dedicated. But then after a while, I started search for something new, something that I could test my own limits and to see how much I can push myself to do something. And I always like running, so I was running quite a lot when I was playing soccer too. So it was natural for me to try running. And once I tried it, did a couple of races, I was hooked.
Oh, absolutely. So you obviously have always been quite active. Did you go straight into running on the trails and mountains, or did you start on the road? You know, how did it? What led you to the mountains?
So from the beginning, I was combining both roads and mountains. But and I was just participating to the races that was up here in the north. So it was both some road races and some trail races. And then my first sky race was Tromsø Sky Race. It was the first year they were making the race here in Tromsø, and it was a very special experience because it's so different than road running, and the experiences are so much more than just running on the roads. And that made me try some other races in Europe, and I just really got into the trail running because it was so special to me. So I was just keep going that way, but still doing roads as well.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned at the very beginning there that you were quite keen to sort of push yourself. Is that what makes you want to continue to push forward with your mountain running, to sort of see what you're capable of?
Yeah, there are so many challenges in mountain running, like the long distances and the steep races and the technical ones, and also the fast ones to challenge your speed. So it's so much more in mountain running than just running up and down. It's just so diverse.
Yeah, all those different elements that are coming together. Okay, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced during your journey, and if you could just talk us through it and how you overcame it?
I think it was difficult to find out what I wanted and find my path. At first I was playing soccer, and it was difficult to quit playing soccer because I knew I couldn't play soccer, do running, my studies, and I couldn't do everything and be good at everything. So I had to find out what I wanted to do and believe in myself. Like, you cannot look back. You just have to believe in your choice and push through it. So it was a bit hard to go in this direction, like to try something new, and also what distance, like did I want to do roads or trails or long races or short races, or there are so many different options. So I had some years the 2018 season, I didn't do so much trail racing. I did more roads, and I didn't feel quite happy just doing roads the whole year. So that's why last year I was going more back to the trails again. Mm-hmm. So it's like finding the balance and finding what you want to do and what you're good at, and it's difficult to find your path.
Yeah. And I guess what you said there about, you'd played soccer for so long that it's what we say about going outside of a comfort zone, isn't it? You were obviously very comfortable with the soccer. You knew it inside out. You knew what your capabilities were. So to have to go outside of your comfort zone to do something totally new, I can imagine that it was quite a daunting prospect.
Yeah, and I was very established in soccer, like in my team, and I was also playing for the national team, so I was very into soccer. So I think maybe it was a surprise for a lot of people that I was just quitting soccer to just try something completely new.
There must have been something in you that knew that, you wanted to do something different. Okay, and over the course of your mountain running and some of these incredible races that you've done, what's been one of the biggest mistakes that you've made? And could you just talk us through, obviously things don't always go right on these adventurous races.
I'm trying to not, or of course I did a lot of mistakes, but I think that in the end you just have to see your mistakes as learning. And I think I'm always like pushing my limits. So sometimes I push over the limit. So a couple of times I did too much. It doesn't have to be too much training, but like the total of training and studying and the everyday life, that I cannot keep the balance. So it's just, I just hit the wall, and it takes a lot of time to recover and like start over and get up to the same level and be better again. And I've done that a couple of times, like being completely finished and I have to start over and just try to get back on track again. I mean, I like to do training and I like to run so much that sometimes maybe I do too much.
And I was going to actually, one of my questions I was going to ask you later, but it seems a good point now, is, you obviously being a medical student on its own is a hugely demanding thing. How do you manage to fit it all in to your life with your training? And do you find that sometimes your brain just needs a rest, not just your body, when it's working so hard?
So I'm very I've always been very organized, so very structured, and I always have a plan. That makes it easier because in my day I always know what I'm doing. At this time I'm training, at this time I'm studying, now I'm relaxing, and now I'm training again. So it makes it easier when you have a plan. But of course there are times like before my exams where you have to have more focus on studying, and then you have to adjust your training. And last year I wasn't really good at that. So I was just keep pushing my training and also doing too much in school. So I was, after my exam, it was okay until my exam, but then after I was feeling tired, and it wasn't just the physical but like the mental, because when you go to training you have to be ready to push yourself and to have some pain. But when you are tired mentally from reading all day, you don't have that mentality to have a good training session. And I didn't pay attention to that. It's easy to think about after, like, I should have done this and this, but when you're in it, you just you're too blind. You just keep going and until you can't go any further.
And maybe you kind of need to experience that for yourself so that you can really look. If someone had just told you, you probably would have thought, oh no, I'm fine. But to actually experience and realize that, next time when you've got your something demanding coming up in your exams or whatever, that you need to allow for that and give yourself a break.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it can just be a good thing to just take a break from from running and having this pressure from running and focusing in something else. I think it's good for the mind, and it's also good for the body to have some time to recover. And because you all the year you push yourself physically, so if you are taking this time before, for example, an exam, to just do some easy training and focus in something else, I think that's no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, who or what have had the biggest influence on your mountain running? Are there any people that that have really inspired you or influenced you?
Yeah, I have to say that before I started in the Salomon team a couple of years ago, I was really looking up to Emily Forsberg, because she was like the star in trail running and still is. And when I heard that they were coming up to Tromsø to have a race, I was so excited and I just wanted to do this race. And it was where it started, I think. And it's nice to have these people to look up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you're a little bit further down the line with your running, have you found that you have a favorite race distance?
I think I prefer the 20K distance, like a bit shorter, where you can use your speed, but also like long enough so you can you have to fight mentally, not just with your speed. And also I've been feeling more and more comfortable with the marathon distance. Before I thought it was too long and I didn't really want to do it, but now I'm just starting to experience it more this year and I like it.
Oh, good. You like the added challenge. So what will you be focusing on in 2020?
So I think my main goal this year will be Transvulcania. And this year I'm trying the ultra marathon distance. So I'm a bit nervous about that because it's unknown territory for me, like the ultra distance. I've done one ultra before, but it's 4 years ago. So yes, I just hoping to survive.
Oh, I'm sure you will. And what about long term? I mean, obviously you're 24, so you've got hopefully you'll have a long lots of years ahead of you of enjoying your running. What would you like to achieve long term over the course of your running?
Yeah, so since I'm very since I like to challenge myself, I would probably do some longer stuff after some years. So now I'm just trying to hold back a little bit and not do too much long stuff. Just try to work on my speed, do the more shorter races. And this year I'm following the Skyrunning World Series. So I like to have a purpose with this season where you collect points and go to the final and try to do well in the series.
Good. And I guess that for the moment, if you're training for a shorter race, it's probably easier to fit it around your medical studies. Whereas if you were training for a double marathon, it's
exactly.
Yeah.
And also with the road running, it's more you can do some road races and then you can do some shorter trail races, and you can still have your speed in both races.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now I'd like to just ask you a little bit about your training and what it looks like. So if you can think back to when you were preparing for one of your favorite races in 2009, how does your sort of training look? What sort of volume of miles would you be running, and what sort of sessions would you incorporate?
So my winter training, I have the most volume, and I do a lot of threshold, like 2,000 meters, 1,000 meters, 10 minutes repeats or something like that. And I mostly do them on the treadmill because outside now at home it's very icy and a lot of snow. So I don't think it's good to do the hard sessions outside for injuries and stuff. So it's a lot of treadmill, maybe 4 or 5 threshold sessions in a week, and then one long run, and then just easy running in between. So it's quite easy actually, and it's very a very normal training program. It's not really special. Yeah.
And do you spend what about training for the hills? You know, do you spend a lot of time practicing your hill reps and things like that?
I have 1 hill rep a week on the treadmill in the winter. So when I can go outside, when the snow is melting, I can do hill reps outside. Or yeah, and it's more mountain running in the summer, of course, but in the winter, where I have my most important training block, it's inside.
Okay, and now moving on to race day, how do you like to approach a race to you know, sort of, you know, from when you wake up to getting ready to cross the line? You know, what do you sort of what things do you do to make sure that your race goes the way you want it to?
It depends if the race is in the morning or if it's later in the day. If it's in the morning, I just and also depends how long the race is. But normally, if I run around 20K, I wake up maybe 3 hours before the race and have some breakfast. And then I can go to sleep again, trying to relax. And of course, I'm nervous, so it's hard to relax, but doing my best. And then warm up for maybe half an hour. And yeah, I don't have any special routines or anything I do before every race or something like that. I'm just trying to work on my mind.
Yeah. And thinking about your mind when you know, if you're in a race or even in a training, when it's, you know, when it's really hard and you're, like you said, you know, it's really uncomfortable, what sort of mental strategies do you use to try and get you through it?
So I think that I'm very fascinated about the mind and how it can push the body. Like, I think the body is capable of everything. It's just the mind is pushing it. So anyways, if I have a bad race, I always want to finish, because then I know I just have to work with my mind and my body will do it. And I know that, and I also think that I like pain. This is what I like. I like to push myself. It's supposed to be hard, but I will do it. So it's just, I'm not even thinking about quitting because it's not an option. Or I'm not thinking about going slow because that's not an option. And I know that everyone else has it the same way. Like, they are tired too. They have to work with themselves too. And if I can just push myself a little bit more, I know that I can do a better race. So it's difficult. Like, a lot of people ask me what I think about when I'm running, and it's difficult because the mind is like, there's so many mindsets during a race. Like, sometimes you're tired and you're on the low and you really have to work with your mind, like, to push yourself. And then sometimes you're in a runner's high and you can just flow and you just think about, oh, I just love this. I love this race. I love these views, because you're in a different mindset. So, and especially in longer races, you go through a lot of ups and downs. So I think it's just how you push through these downs, so you can go up again mentally and physically.
Yeah, and I guess the good thing about the more you do, the more experience you have. When you're in those lows, you do know that you are going to come out of it, and you know, there is the likelihood is that if I can just get through this bit, you know, or I will feel better again. I know I will.
exactly.
Okay, can you give us a quick overview of your nutrition and your hydration? You know, what do you like before and during a race?
I like to have, before I just eat just a normal breakfast. And since I'm traveling a lot, I can't have anything very specific. But most hotels or places have some kind of bread or banana or something that's light and good for the digestion. So yeah, it's just something easy, like some bread with bananas and Nutella or something like that. And in the race, I like to have my own gels, which I know my stomach don't have a problem with, and I like the taste of it, and like I have been trying it for training, so I know how it's like. And I try to have gels every half an hour at least. So even if I don't feel like I need it, I take it because I want to keep a steady energy level, not having these dips in the race. So I just keep it coming until the end of the race. If it's a longer race, it's like over a few hours. I like to have a piece of banana or something I take from the aid station. And I always, if I don't carry my own water, I always take something from every aid station.
Yeah, that's good. So you've got your strategy that works for you, and you know that, yeah, you just you need to have it even if you don't feel like you really want it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I never take a gel when I go downhill, because then I get the hold, or the stomach is not really liking it. So I always take it in the uphill.
Yeah, that's a good tip to give while you're going a little bit slower, just to let it.
Exactly.
And can you give us a quick rundown of the clothing and the gear that you particularly like when you're mountain running?
Yeah, I just like it light and comfortable. It's almost like you're running naked. It's like you don't feel the fabric, and it's I prefer that. And also the backpack, that it's not too tight. I don't like when things are tight around my thorax, because I want to feel like my lungs can stretch out the maximum. So in general, just light and comfortable.
Yeah, so nothing that restricts you across your chest. Yeah.
I don't like any compression gear or something like that.
No. Okay. And now, are there any tips that you could give the audience for running up steep hills? What do you do? Do you make a decision about whether you're going to walk a bit, or do you always try and run? What sort of tips could you share?
I think that's quite difficult myself, like when to run and when to hike, because sometimes if it's very steep, I think that hiking fast is more efficient than running. So it's a bit hard to know when to run and when to hike, but mostly I try to run, and if I feel like, okay, this is killing my legs, or this is very steep, then I try to hike. And also maybe if it depends if it's in the beginning of the race, I'm maybe hiking more, because I don't want to get stiff too early in the race. But in the end of the race, I know I'm close to the finish, I can push more in the so try to run more in the uphills.
Okay. And what about making sure that you recover well after after a race or after a particularly intense training session? What do you do to make sure that you recover well?
I'm trying to get some food in the straight after the race, and some good recovery food. My favorite, and what they say is the one of the best recovery foods, is like banana and chocolate milk.
Yeah.
So I try to get something like that, like something with sugar and carbs. And also I always, depends how long the race is. I don't want to just stop. I have to move, like walking or taking a small jog, or uh, just to cool down a little bit, and drink a lot of water. But also all of these things depend so much about how long the race is, if it's very hot outside or if it's cold. Like if it's a cold day, if it's raining and you are very cold, I think the best is just to have a hot shower and get dressed and get some warm clothes. Like, so it's a lot of factors that depending on the weather and the race. So yeah.
Okay, and what about anything, do you do any other do you incorporate any yoga or anything like that, apart from your running training? Do you incorporate any cross training or yoga or anything like that to complement the actual running side of things?
I do a lot of strength training. I do that maybe 4 times a week or something, and trying to combine it with the core and stability, and also some explosive strength training. So a combination of preventing injuries and getting stronger. And I also like to do some skiing, ski mountaineering or cross-country skiing. Yeah, I should be better using the foam roller and stretching more. I'm trying to improve on that one.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone that I've spoken to who's in their 20s has said, "Oh, I really need to do more stretching, and then they speak to people that are in their 30s, and they're like, "I've learnt, I've got to do my stretches because I can't get away with everything that I used to in my 20s. I've got to do it now." So maybe that's just something that comes in a few years' time. You'll be like, "Oh, I think I need to do that now."
But I think it's important for everyone, and especially if you have some pain when you run, and I think it's important to see why do I have pain? Like, do I have a weakness in my hip, or is there something in my back or something that makes me having pain exactly this place? And trying to work with not only the pain, but like where the pain comes from.
Yes,
like,
treating the cause of the problem instead of just
I've been working a lot over the years on my hips, for example, because after playing soccer, one of my foot are stronger than the other, so I'm just trying to balance the feet, and I think it helps me to be a better runner too.
Yeah, just correcting that imbalance. Yeah. So do you have an off season?
Yes, normally I have an off season. My last race is normally in October-ish. Then I have a 10 days, 2 weeks off season. But it doesn't mean I don't go for a run if I want to go for a run. It just means that I have no plans. If one day I feel like not going running, I don't go running, and it's just what my body wants to and what my mind wants to. And normally I just fill this time with doing more work at school.
Yeah, but you can do it with your feet up.
Yes.
Okay, now the last few questions now. What would you say has been the best piece of running advice you've ever received?
Oof. That's a hard question. I think what has helped me a lot, it's I think it's I had some technique tips some years ago, like how I use my arms and how my arms are making the path for my legs, not the opposite. So and then I had some exercises for this also, like some drills and stuff, and I feel like that has been helping me a lot to be faster, my running technique.
Oh, good. And if there's anybody who's watching in the audience who is perhaps just thinking about entering their first mountain race, or has just entered, what would be a piece of advice that you would give them?
I think it's maybe the same like I'm thinking now with my ultra race in May in Transvulcania, because it's a bit terrifying to know that you're going to run this race and you know that it's going to be hard, but you still want to do it. And I think it's okay if you just you know that the race is coming and you start now preparing, and not only physical, like you're doing your training, and you're doing your training specifically to that race. I think that's good. But also the mind needs to prepare, like the mental part. I use a lot of visualization.
Yeah.
Visual the race, and that helps me a lot. So just when I have some time, relax, I close my eyes, I think about the race, like how it's going to feel when you run this race, and then when the race is actually coming, you are prepared, not the training, and you kind of know what's coming because you prepared your mind to.
Yeah, and great. That's really good advice. And what about anybody who's watching who perhaps already has some experience of running mountain races, but they're keen to improve their performance? What would be a tip that you could share that you perhaps feel to help improve your performance?
So the work for a race, you do the months and the weeks before the race. I think it's good to have some good training blocks before the race. If you're doing a longer race, then get some specifically some longer runs in your training. If you're doing a short race, more speed, then you have to do more speed work. Like to always keep in mind what kind of race it is, and try to work your training to that race as specifically as possible.
And do you work with a coach to do your plans, or do you do it yourself? How do you go about sort of designing your training?
Right now, I do my training. I do the training myself. I make the plan myself. But after some years with trying and failing, and I know what works for me. I know what my body reacts to. So I kind of know what kind of plan I want. So yeah.
And I guess as well that means that you can make sure that you're fitting in your other commitments, and you know what's coming up with your studying and when you're going to need to be spending more time in the books. Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's what works for you is best. Okay. I think that just about brings us to the end. Really, thank you ever so much for joining us today, Yngvild. It was lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
What we'll do is we'll put some links underneath the interview so people can follow you online and see how you get on at Transvulcania. We'll be looking forward to seeing how you go and seeing your journey, a bright young star for the future, I'm sure. So thank you everybody for watching us, and thank you again, Yngvild, for joining us.